We're with Terry Bonnette, attorney with Nemeth Law in Detroit. Thanks for talking to us today.
I'm glad to do it, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. You know, you work with companies regarding labor issues, and we're talking about election year politics in the workplace. What have you been hearing these days?
Well, we're hearing the same thing we hear every 4 years, but we're hearing more of it, and we're hearing it in different ways. You know, every time the election cycle rolls around, I think we see that workplace politics get a little bit more divisive. And on top of that, we're seeing that the workplace itself has changed. Now we're talking about people in their own homes communicating like we're communicating right now over some sort of video conferencing platform. I think a lot of people would agree, there's certainly anecdotal evidence, that people actually tend to be more polite over video conferencing. I don't know if it's the mediated format or if, but typically people are better behaved on camera than not on camera. But conversely, we're also seeing people forget about what might be in the background, whether they have, you know, their political candidate posters hanging behind them on their wall, or whether they're wearing logos on their clothing or hats to meetings. The communication is happening in a different way.
Now bring that to from a legal point of view. Can you wear a hat or a shirt pushing a particular candidate or a cause to work online or at work?
Right. And I think that's going to come down to whether you work for a private employer or a public employer, and what your employer's stand on that is. Private employers are generally free to dictate or to have rules in place about what an employee can and cannot wear to work.
Tonight, President Trump going head-to-head with one of Akron's largest employers.
Down in Ohio, Goodyear popped up in the headlines. Seems like 1,000 news cycles ago. Actually, it was just August. Company policy banned political apparel like Make America Great Again hats, but not Black Lives Matter stuff. That's because Goodyear, like many other companies, decided BLM is not political or partisan. That didn't sit well with someone.
This morning, the president sending this tweet urging people not to buy Goodyear tires.
And it's this Black Lives Matter button handed out by his union that's now at the center of a labor dispute.
In Seattle, flip side of the same issue.
Ohio-based Kroger, which owns both QFC and Fred Meyer stores here in the Northwest, said employees can't wear the button on the job anymore.
Store management came up with an alternative plan. Instead of buttons, it passed out standing together wristbands. A solution not so satisfying for some.
And standing together for what?
The question, though, is what about your boss? Can your boss be talking a lot about politics, maybe even trying to get you to vote a certain way?
Maybe. How's that for a lawyer answer? Actually, federal campaign regulations dictate, you know, what would be considered corporate speech. And you're going to have to look at, is the boss, you know, what level is it? Is this my mid-level supervisor that just happens to have an opinion that and is expressing that opinion? Probably not going to implicate federal campaign law. But certainly, if this is the owner of the organization, if this is the president of the organization, if this is the chief financial officer of an organization, that person creates the appearance that they're speaking on behalf of the organization, and then the corporation is engaging in political speech. Is the president of a corporation legally permitted to say, vote for candidate X or you don't have a job here? Then certainly not. Michigan's election laws prohibit employers from taking coercive measures in order to dictate the outcome of a vote. Same thing, an employer can't offer a bonus or a reward for voting a particular way. Those would all violate those election laws.
Now let's look at some other outward items of expression. Masks in the workplace.
President Trump this week suggested some people choose to wear masks not for protection, but to signal they don't like him. And with rare exception, the president has repeatedly refused to wear a mask in public.
It can almost be seen as a political statement whether you wear or don't wear a mask. And what are employers empowered to do or not do regarding all of that?
Well, we're talking about two different sets of laws. Now we're talking about health regulations. We're talking about OSHA. We're talking about MIOSHA. We're talking about executive orders that, depending on when this airs, may or may not still be in effect. But certainly at this point in time, if an employer is open and they have employees in the workplace, they are required to abide by certain safety protocols. And one of those is that employees must wear masks when they are in common areas. If an employee chooses not to wear a mask, certainly employers have to take the appropriate action to address that situation. To the extent that that is political speech, I think that we're getting into some interesting areas about what is speech, first of all. Certainly, a private employer can limit the type of speech or the subject matter of speech, so long as they're not violating one of those other regulations or rules that we talked about. But I would also say that to the extent, and now we're talking about something that probably doesn't apply legally to private employers, but certainly from just a communication standpoint, any right to free speech that a person has is limited when it becomes dangerous. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. So to the extent that a speech would endanger somebody else, I think it's okay to limit that speech.
Terry Bonnette, Nemeth Law in Detroit. Thanks for talking to One Detroit.
Thank you very much, Bill. Take care.